Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today for our 2024 Landlord Symposium. We are in the segment number 2, and I will be introducing Nicholas Yuva with the Washington State Landlord Mitigation Program. And during his presentation, Rebecca, who is on this call as well, she will be able to ask the questions. So if you don't mind, can you please put the questions in the chat, and Rebecca will ask the questions, and Nicholas will be here to provide additional assistance. And thank you, Nicholas, and it's on to you now.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone joining us for this presentation. My name is Nicholas Yuva. I do work for the Department of Commerce, the Landlord Mitigation Program. So for those of you that are aware of the program, thank you for being a participant in it. It's been highly beneficial to landlords and tenants throughout Washington since 2018. Here at the Department of Commerce, we have several programs, and you may have heard about the legislation trying to open up a division of housing separate from Commerce. That's because of the fact that our book of business is so large that it's almost becoming encumbering to Commerce's other duties. But you'll see that we have all of these different portfolios within the Department of Commerce, housing and homelessness being the largest. Who am I? Before 2018, I was in the private market. I was a landlord myself. I worked as a property manager for several properties and companies. I had my own business for a while that was sold off to a real estate company when I moved to Utah, and I continued working in property management. I started out as a maintenance person years and years ago, way too far for me to even think about anymore, and just worked my way up through the steps and got my certification through the state of Washington, my property manager's license, got my ARM through IRM. And yeah, that's me with that beautiful tiger in Thailand back 7 years ago now. But the point of that picture is if you have a bucket list, start working on it now. Don't wait. Just go out and find adventures when you can. Life is way too short. Don't let things pass you by. The Landlord Mitigation Program, there's an important note that you should remember as landlords when you're entering into this to submit a claim, and that is for any of the programs. The landlord is prohibited from pursuing legal or collection action against the tenant for damages and unpaid rents during the eviction moratorium period. That piece wasn't lifted from legislation. So if you have unpaid rents from that period, you'd be ineligible, but rents outside of that period that are not considered damages, you can pursue those when you receive a claim. Ooh. We have 3 programs now. We've had many more over the past years, but right now, well, we have one that's temporarily paused, and then we have 2 that are active. The landlord damage relief and the survivor relief programs are active. They are funded through legislative appropriations that we get every year, as well as document recording fees, which comes in the form of monthly income into the program. And then the tenancy preservation program, we have put in an ask to legislation and the governor's budget to be included for enough to reopen this program. It's a wonderful program that helps prevent evictions, and I'll talk about the program, but we don't know for sure when it will reopen. The soonest it could reopen, if we receive funding for it, would be around August or September of 2025. But we'll still talk about it in this particular presentation. The damage relief program is the original program. It was originally called the Landlord Mitigation Program until legislation kept adding a new sub-program every year. So we had to rename it the Damage Relief Program, and this offers 2 different types of relief. If you have a tenant, pardon me, that's moving in, they've failed the HQ, or the unit has failed the HQS inspection before the tenants moved in. And as a landlord, you've gone in, you've made the effort to get the unit up to the inspection level, and you passed a subsequent inspection. Well, you can receive up to $1,000 from the Department of Commerce for doing that. The first $500 is on you, but after that, every dollar adds up towards that $1,000. And because you took that time to make those repairs and get that tenant in, we'll give you up to 14 days of unpaid rent as well. So it's highly worthwhile. It's above and beyond the $1,000. So you get up to $1,000 and 14 days, up to 14 days of unpaid rent before the tenant even occupies the unit. And then once the tenant is in there, you qualify for another part of the program where you can receive up to $5,000 towards those damages. And when they move out, you can claim unpaid rents and other move-out charges. Keep in mind, lease break charges, early termination fees, or deposit forfeitures will not qualify as eligible in the program. So you won't be able to claim those, but you can claim the unpaid rent to the last day the tenant occupied the unit, and of course, physical damages throughout. There is one piece of that we prorate, that's the carpeting. Carpeting is prorated over a 7-year lifespan. That's more generous than HUD offers on apartment grade carpeting. But they have two scales. They have apartment grade and senior grade. We went right down the middle and hit 7 years for any of the carpeting you're replacing. So you have to provide proof of age, but that's usually done through an invoice or a certificate of occupancy, or if the tenant wrote new on the move-in condition report, we will accept that. I'll get to questions in a little bit later, Mel, but that's an easy one to answer. One of the documents that's required is a tenant ledger. The tenant ledger shows the rents that are due. The move-out letter and the application itself, you're going to put a move-out date on, will identify where that rent stops. But for the rest of the questions, I'll get to those at the end of the presentation. I'll be giving you a lot of information, so probably answer along the way. The landlord will receive payment directly from the Department of Commerce. It does not go through the tenant or the subsidy provider. The landlord submits the claim, the landlord receives payment. We've got a pretty nifty portal that we'll talk about a little bit later in the program as well. That portal is where you'll enter your information through Secure Access Washington. It'll identify you as the landlord. And right now, payments are currently about 30 to 60 days from the date of approval. Not claim submission, but the date of approval. But we're reviewing claims in about 3 to 5 days right now, 3 to 5 business days. The Tenancy Preservation Program, this is the program that's paused right now. This program offers a 0-interest loan to the tenant when they're in court and both parties agree to the program. If the tenant is low income, limited resource, or under financial hardship, they could request access to the Tenancy Preservation Program. If the landlord agrees, then you get the judge to determine that tenant eligible. And then once you do, they will, you'll fill out a form and then complete the application online, submit it. Again, the review time on that's about 3 to 5 business days. When it's open, payments would be about 30 to 60 days out, much better than it was during the COVID period. But this one does not have a cap on it. So you could claim several months of rent in this program. I know that the eviction takes a long time to get through. And by the time you're filling out the form for this program, you could be 3, 4, 5 months of back rent owed. The program will pay the full amount of the judgment, so that'll include all unpaid rents, court costs, and the court allowed late fees. The tenant must remain in the unit. This is a preservation program. This preserves tenancy. You can also claim up to 3 months of future rent to give that tenant time to stabilize their income. Pardon me. And Commerce does not have a collection effort. We don't go chasing down the tenant for these funds. However, if they don't repay the funds or have get that loan back to a zero balance, they will not be able to access the program again in the future. So, again, keep your eyes on this around August, September of next year. Hopefully it'll reopen if we get the funding for it. It's a really great way to prevent you from having to turn over a unit, face vacancy loss, and then put another tenant in place. And then the Survivor Relief Program is the newest program, became effective in 2022. Tenants may this is for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, pardon me, frog in the throat today, unlawful harassment, or stalking. Hope that helps. Tenant must terminate due to those reasons. So they can't both be a survivor and terminate later for another reason. So if they're fleeing from any of those qualifying events, then they can vacate with little or no notice. The landlord must refund the entire security deposit, and then they can apply to the program. You can receive up to $5,000 towards damages and unpaid rents, just like the damage relief program. No subsidies required for this. They just have to be able to substantiate the qualifying event. We're pretty loose on what's required for that. A letter from the case manager, a police report, restraining order, or a notarized self-affidavit from the tenant. And again, I can't stress this enough, it must be related to the move out. And it has to fall under those categories. So harassment between neighbors, that's not really going to fall into this. This is really for survivors of where they feel their life is threatened. This program is not subject to public disclosure. This one, we fought hard on the legislation to make sure of this. Due to the nature of the program, we don't want to share names, addresses, or other information that may put those tenants in jeopardy in the future. Well, and that last statement, it's to be determined with supporting documents. We're open on this. So if you have something that may not fall into what I've already mentioned for that qualifying information, then go ahead and present it to us. We'll examine it and then decide if it's going to function for the needs of the program. Now, the new claim portal, if you haven't been there yet, it's and you've used the old system, the application through Smartsheets, the claim portal is so much more robust. Not only does it take the claim application, it gives you an eye on historical claims that are submitted in the portal. In the future update, it'll include all those claims that were submitted in Smartsheets years ago. That's been a hard task for us to get pushed through, but it will happen in the future. It's on the punch list for it. If you go in there and you can't remember your statewide vendor number, it's got a search tool built into it, so you can just go right in your search tool. The search tool is a little bit easier. Well, it's a lot easier than the Ops Financial Management search tool. OFM's tool is very specific. You have to be very specific on your entries. If you do one thing wrong, you're not going to pull up any results. But on ours, it will pull up every statewide vendor number that's associated with the query that you put in. If you put your name in and you're the registrar for the program, it'll pull it up. It'll also show you if your statewide vendor number is active or if it's been purged, which means it hasn't been used in about a year and a half or updated in about a year and a half, and OFM has purged the number, which means you'll have to go back to OFM and get a new number. Then, of course, you'll see the real-time status of the claims. You can go in on your historical claims. It'll tell you if it's in review, if it's been approved or denied. You can click into it to see pull up your application again. It'll give you a list of denial reasons. And you can correct it right there. You can edit your application and resubmit it for review, all in the same place. And one of the biggest features that claimants have really been happy with is the save feature. You don't have to complete it in one sitting. You can start it, save it, come back to it later, and update it, and then submit it when you're ready. We're not getting a lot of questions, so I'll jump on this. The damage relief program does not apply to a conventional resident. It only applies to residents that receive rental assistance at some point during their tenancy. That can be something like a one-time rental assistance check from Salvation Army, as an example. Or it can be a rapid rehousing check, which is a limited time span, or a lifetime program like the Housing Choice Vouchers, or anything in between. So long as the subsidy comes from a nonprofit or government agency, you're going to qualify for the program. And that does include, it does not include the COVID relief program that came out of the mitigation, was a sub-program of the mitigation program, but it does include ERAP and TRAP. So if you have tenants that received ERAP or TRAP during the pandemic, they're all qualified for this program. So I highly encourage you to look at this. And then, yeah, I mentioned the save and complete in the last day. So we'll move forward on that. Secure Access Washington. is what you have to go through to access the portal. Our website offers a step-by-step guide. I recommend that you go ahead and just open that up. It's very easy, a lot of big pictures and just short statements on how to work your way through Secure Access Washington to the portal. Once you're signed into the portal through Secure Access Washington, it'll appear on your dashboard. So every time you go into the Secure Access Washington in the future, it'll just be a one button you push right on your dashboard. We do this to enhance the security of the system. The state faced a lot of potential, well, not fraud and potential fraud during the pandemic, and we want to make sure that these funds are going to Washington landlords. Statewide vendor registration. I want to talk about something that's coming up in the future. It's in the works. It's definitely going to happen, but the statewide vendor number is going to become what's called One Washington. If you have a statewide vendor number, don't worry, you will not need to re-register. It will carry over to the new system. However, One Washington will be a new type of state vendor registration system throughout the entire state of Washington. Quite simply, the statewide vendor system is a bit old and outdated. I think last they said they've got 2 people in America that know how to work on the system that is running it. And one of those is retired, so they had to update it. And One Washington, you'll be seeing that launch here in the next, probably in late 2025, 2026. Again, keep your statewide vendor numbers, they will carry over. But if you don't have one by that time, you'll want to register at One Washington. What this does is this registration allows us to pay you. It identifies you as the payee. And keep in mind, these funds are taxable. It is rental income or income for your property. So you will receive a 1099 at the end of the year. You want to keep that number updated. So go in and register the registration and update it. Well, I'd recommend once a year, just so you don't risk purging or losing that number and having to go reapply. But that 1099 will be sent out in early January for the previous year. Statewide vendor numbers, you can have one for all of your properties. If you're a property management company, I'd recommend that you probably do one per owner. You could go so macro that, or micro, sorry, that you're doing one per property. However is best suited for your bookkeeper. Think about doing taxes. You want to have a 1099 for each individual property, each individual business entity, or just one for the company that you'll pass through to the owners. So a lot of options. There's nothing really restricting you on how many you get. I know there are large property management companies. They have one statewide vendor number, but they have an extension for each individual property. That's possible. A lot of different options again, but do think your bookkeeper when you're applying for this, so that or your accountant, so that their life's a little bit easier. I think I'm going to have a lot of time for questions at the end. Let's see. Can you appeal a claim? So if your claim is denied, typically we said no. You can work with us and resubmit your claim, but if you don't have the required documents, we would say that there's no real reason to appeal. However, we reevaluated that and decided, well, we should have an appeal form at least, so we can address any issues that come up. But we do have one. It's not available on the website. You have to request it after your claim has been denied. Once your claim has been denied, of course, we want you to talk to us first. Maybe we can fix that through an additional document or explanation, or sometimes a notarized statement from a interested party, such as the tenant, a contractor, or the landlord, will suffice. But ultimately, sometimes claims just can't be approved. And I'll tell you, primarily that's due to missing move-in condition reports. If you don't have a move-in condition report, we cannot make an exception for you. That document specifically is written into the RCW that governs the program as a required document. The other documents are pretty simple and straightforward: rental agreement, in the damage relief program, proof of subsidy, and the survivor relief program, proof of the qualifying event. Those both have to be third party. And then tenant ledger invoices. We ask that you don't include pictures unless we request them. It's rare that we request them, but sometimes if you have cabinet replacements, we want to see that the tenant caused the damage, common area damage. We want to see the damage and we need to see evidence that the tenant caused that damage. And that can be a simple statement from a witness, but we'll talk to you about it. So again, just submitting the claim is the biggest piece.